Hello and welcome to our last lecture before this next test. We're over interest groups. So today we're going to talk about interest groups and how they're just you organized. So what are interest groups? Well, interest groups are political organizations that are organized around protecting or creating legislation that protects a good or a service. But wait, remember there are two types of goods, so we have to have two types of groups. According to Mansur Olson, who did all of the research on interest groups, there are two types of research groups: public groups and private groups. Public interest groups are organized around public goods. Remember those from the first chapter. Examples of this are AAA, which organizes around roads, the American Taxpayers Union, which organizes around paying taxes, and the NAACP, which organizes around rights for African Americans. However, there's a problem with this type of group. Because the good cannot be taken away from you, why would you mobilize to protect it? Remember the collective action problem from the first chapter. So while these groups have lots of potential members, very few people actually join and mobilize with these groups. The second type of group was organized around private goods. Private goods are goods that are yours, and you don't have to share them. For example, like a Social Security check or your student aid. Examples of this are the AARP, which organizes around Social Security, the NCA, and the Teamsters Union, which organizes around jobs for truck drivers. Private good groups are much stronger than public good groups. While members of these groups have small potential memberships, all the potential members have a strong incentive to join and get active. These groups tend to be the most powerful groups in Washington, with the most powerful group being the AARP. So, what makes a group powerful? Olson says the first thing that makes a group powerful is that it has a small membership group. The fewer people that you are able to organize with, the more likely you are to be able to overcome the collective action problem. Because you know that if one person backs out, you all lose. Private goods are another thing that makes a group powerful. A private good is something that can be taken away from you, that's yours and yours alone, and so you want to defend it, you want to keep it. And then finally, you have to have members who have enough time to be active and enough money to fund group activities. Okay, so if you don't have these things, how do you become powerful? Well, you offer incentives to join. Private goods that you offer members so that they have an incentive to join are things, for example, like roadside assistance. This is what AAA gives you. Discounts, AARP and NRA offer these. Travel discounts, these are offered by Good Sam's Club and the NRA. Or you could have paid trips for your members, like AARP does. Other non-material reasons to join. Well, solidarity. You feel like you're a part of something. And people who might feel like they have a higher purpose will join a group because they want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. Like, for example, in my picture here, we have the whale watchers, the sea shepherds, who go out and attack whaling ships. They do this because they need to feel like they're a part of something bigger than just themselves. So what kind of groups form interest groups? Well, business groups like Boeing or Kohler. Trade or professional organizations will form interest groups like the National Cattlemen's Association, or the American Medical Association, or the American Political Science Association, or even CAST, the Science Teachers Association. Labor groups like labor unions, Teamsters, and the TEA will form. Demographic groups like LULAC or the NAACP. Single issue groups like the NRA or the AARP. Ideological groups like Focus on the Family or Cato. Or religious groups like the Catholic Church. These types of groups now will also form think tanks. Think tanks are organized structures that try to that try to promote industry or ideas. Examples: beef commercials and pork commercials are done by the National Cattlemen's Association think tank, and the pork commercials are done by the pork producers um, think tank. Um, During the 1980s and 70s, tobacco companies got together with think tanks to do research on what the benefits of tobacco are. Um, if you want more information about that, you can watch the movie Thank You for Smoking. It's actually kind of humorous. So how do interest groups work? What do they do? Well, there are multiple legal strategies they can actually go through. They can lobby Congress and the executive. They can file court cases. They can do grassroots lobbying and protests. They can contribute to campaigns and elections. They provide information to voters, build agendas, and they monitor programs and legislation. So let's talk about each one of these things individually. First of all, lobbyists. A lobbyist is a person who goes to the government to speak on behalf of a group. They can be professional, semi-professional, meaning they do it part-time, or they can be an amateur. Now, here's the kind of interesting thing about this. Amateur lobbyists can actually be the most effective groups when it comes to lobbying Congress. This is how the AARP does it. So what can they do legally? Well, legally, a lobbyist can go to Congress, the president, the bureaucracy, armed with information, convince them that their argument is right. They can testify at congressional hearings to give information to lawmakers about the effects of the laws they're considering. And they can work with bureaucrats to make sure that laws and regulations are enforceable and are done in such a way that they're not a detriment to the country as a whole. They can also introduce candidates that have the same ideas together so that they can actually work together and actually form legislation that people agree is a good legislation. So what are some of the things that they could do that are illegal? Well, like Ted Stevens, you can go to this Wikipedia article to find out more about him. They can give gifts. However, this is illegal because a gift is a bribe, and it's illegal to bribe members of Congress. They can give money. For example, William J. Jefferson. This was a Democratic member of Congress who liked to keep $1 million in cold hard cash as bribes. It was quite literally cold and hard. He liked to keep it in his freezer, frozen in ice blocks. You can be sent on money on paid vacations. The first link here is a link that was done for The Distinguished Gentleman, an Eddie Murphy film. But the second link here is actually about Jack Abramoff, a Republican lobbyist who would actually send members of Congress to go to the Bahamas for vacation. So how do interest groups lobby the courts? Well, they can file court cases which support their ideas. The ACLU is really good at this. When a court case is filed by someone else, though, you can file an amicus curiae brief if you think that the court should rule in their favor or if they should rule against you. How do you organize grassroots and protests? Well, if you have a strong active group with lots of time on its hands, like the AARP, you can organize people to conduct grassroots campaigns. This can include going to Congress and talking to Congress directly, phoning congressional offices, writing letters, voting with the group, or you could have them show up for a protest. The aim is to put a physical picture with the number of voters that you will be making unhappy, so that when the members of Congress go to vote, they have to think, is this worth doing? Interest groups can also provide campaigns with donations and like contributions. Once again, if you click on this, it's going to take you to a link with The Distinguished Gentleman. But here's the thing about these donations. There's so much money going out there that it doesn't matter what you decide. For example, in the link it talks about if you take money from sugar producers, that's fine. But if you don't, well, the candy manufacturers who don't like to have higher sugar prices will be just as likely to give you money. That means that no matter how you stand in Congress, someone's willing to give you money to support you for your stance. The effect has been that we've had so much money flood into Congress that it doesn't really affect Congress anymore because it doesn't matter what they do. They're going to get money for it. So, things that are more effective. You can mobilize your votes during elections and tell them how to vote, providing information. Every group does this, and it's very effective. For example, the next 3 links that you see here are 3 links. The first one is for the ACLU, with the ACLU rating for how well members of Congress support civil rights. Below that, you have the NRA's links, which grades members of Congress by how well they support gun rights. And then after that, you have the NEA, the National Educators Association, which grades Congress based on how well they support local schools. Getting this information to voters helps them make informed decisions. That idea that we talked about last unit when we talked about elections, where they can make that complex decision relatively quickly. It gives them a heuristic that they can actually use. This is especially useful for single-issue voters. Interest groups tell us what we should be talking about and whether programs meet our needs. Every interest group does this by giving out a monthly newsletter and daily emails so that you know what's going on in Congress that will actually affect you. So are they good or are they bad? Well, I used to only have this link here that says it depends whether they're working for you or against you. But I also have to add something else to this, a caveat. Interest groups are powerful because anyone can join them. But because anyone can join them, that also means they can be used by foreign entities. So, for example, with the current thing that's going on with the NRA, where the NRA has been taking donations from Russian oligarchs, and the Russian oligarchs have been using the interest group to basically push Russian ideas in American politics. This could be kind of bad. The book talks about limits that you can have on interest groups and how to limit the interest groups. And I highly suggest you read that chapter because I am going to test you over it. But also keep in mind, if we can't limit interest groups based on their membership, and we can't make sure that only Americans can be a part of our interest groups, how can we be sure that they're actually working for American interests? Because if the NRA is working for Russian interests, what about the other groups? Have a good day. I'll see you later.